Recording in progress.
Okay, I'm really sorry. I didn't realize that that people couldn't hear us online. Okay, great. Well, absolutely welcome to all the wonderful people that are online as well. You're warmly invited to be part of this session, and I hope that you also can join in the conversation as well, that you're not just listening, but that you also actively participate. So that's a note to the people who are facilitating the sessions. Please include our online colleagues. So let me take a moment now to introduce the people on this panel. And before I do, I just want to say that we have been working very hard since 2019, since we became a technological university with the merger of 3 institutions of higher education in the Dublin region. We've been working very hard on the EDI, on developing a culture of equality, diversity, and inclusion. And the people that are going to speak on the panel today have been really central to the effort of bringing an awareness of equality and equity more generally into all the programs and into the activities and into the broader culture of TU Dublin, the way we behave towards one another, the way we reflect and think before we engage with our colleagues on these issues. So I'd like to introduce, first of all, Catherine Bulger. So Catherine, maybe you'd like to come up and take your seat, if that's okay. Catherine Bulger is a qualified counsellor, and she has worked with the Student Counselling Service for many years in that capacity. But over the last number of years, Catherine has really led and been out on the area of sexual harassment and prevention, and sexual violence and harassment and prevention. And Catherine leads that area for us, and it's a very, very active space, thanks to Catherine's own dynamism and commitment that she brings to the issue, as well as her deep clinical knowledge of psychology and the psychology of the individual. So thanks for being here today, Catherine. And Catherine hasn't been too well in the past, as also recent past, so, you know, be gentle with her, please. Our next colleague I'd like to introduce is Philip Owende. Philip, please come and join us. Philip is at the moment head of the Academic Affairs Quality Framework work in TU Dublin. In addition to that, though, Philip has really been a champion and led co-chairs with me the Intercultural and Race Equality Group in the university. And we have worked very closely together on race equity issues over the years. Philip has also had a national role in 2 separate regards. One is as a member of the HEA Intersectionality Group, which kind of spread out of our Athena Swan Committee, our National Athena Swan Committee. And more recently, Philip was a member of the small expert group that were put together by the Higher Education Authority to develop for the sector a second gender equality review and gender equality plan. And Philip was very much central to that. So thank you, Philip, for being with us today and giving up your time in that regard. We also have Catherine Deegan. So Catherine, please come and join us. Catherine Deegan also has had many roles in TU Dublin, And at the moment, she is assistant head of school in electrical and electronic engineering, which is a school that covers our 3 campuses. And prior to that, Catherine had a role as a biomedical engineer at St. James's Hospital, among the many other roles that she has held in her life. She has a particular expertise in assistive technology and is particularly interested in how assistive technology can change education practices in Irish higher education. And Catherine has been telling me that she's actually been kept very busy in the university doing workshops on assistive technology issues and a universal design for learning issues. The kinds of workshops she delivers are things like how to make exams more accessible and how to make exam papers accessible to people of all abilities. So those kinds of really practical activities are the things that Catherine is being asked to do because of her expertise. So thank you, Catherine, for that. We hope to be joined by Bob O'Murrough. Again, some of you will know him. Bob O'Murrough is Senior Manager for Admissions, and that admissions is not just undergraduate, but it includes postgraduate and international students. Bob is coordinator of our gender identity and our gender expression policy and procedure, and handles that very sensitive area really beautifully for us. And we know that Bob is on leave this week. Bob did say that he would be with us, but of course we'll all understand if when he was on leave, he just switched off the TUD part of his brain and may not be here. But nonetheless, we have 3 wonderful people here who've really given a great commitment to TU Dublin, and they're full of knowledge and wisdom. And so I hand over the floor to Sarah to take it from here. Okay, thank you. I just want to check with the people online. I guess we'll have to use the microphone so that the people online will be able to hear us. Okay, so that might mean that when people come to speak, they'll have to come up here, unfortunately. We did have one of these microphones that you can hand to everybody, but it seems to have disappeared. So Sarah, you'll have to speak from here, I'm afraid. Yeah.
Okay, so given that we have a small group today, I would like to make this as a conversation, as an informal conversation where we can ask questions to the panelists. So I think that the best way to proceed is, and I'm going to take the order of presentations by going to all the panel members. So I will ask first Catherine Bolger, and then it was Philip, and then Catherine Deegan, to provide a brief presentation of the practices that you are leading, sexual harassment, gender violence, race equity, and universal design for learning. Given that we have some people who have canceled, I think between 10 and 15 minutes as a presentation of these practices, and then we will ask questions. We will have the opportunity to engage here in a conversation and also mutual learning. I'm sure that we have a lot to learn from this panel before we break for coffee. So Catherine, I know that you have a presentation? I believe so. So we can go on 15 minutes. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone.
Right, there with me, Jackie.
This is simply just an aid to keep me on track because I talk. So the slides will help keep me on track if that's okay for people. Okay. So welcome everybody, and thank you, Sarah and Yvonne, for inviting me to speak briefly. My role within the university, as Yvonne said, I'm a psychologist in the university, and I'm currently leading up the consent role and the ending sexual violence and prevention and response role. So just to give people a bit of background in terms of the Irish context, as I'm sure most people here who have been dealing with gender-based violence at any level will be aware, this is a battle we've been fighting for many, many, many decades, centuries, I would say. So not to just put in the context of 2019 as it's based there, people in different segments and different roles have been fighting sexual violence and gender-based violence for many, many years within universities. But I suppose we have been doing that in little pockets. So for certain, the support services, the counselling services, the medical centres, students' union, anybody who's been supporting staff and students like our HR departments have been dealing with these issues for a very, very long time. In Ireland in 2019, the Minister for Higher and Further Education, Simon Harris, worked with us and put together a framework for us to formally tackle it as such. So as I said, people have been tackling this for many generations, but a formal framework was put in place for all HEIs in Ireland in 2019 after many, many conversations, which helped shape the way forward in terms of how we address sexual violence and gender-based violence, how we might tackle it, and most importantly, how we support those who report or disclose sexual violence, sexual harassment, gender imbalances. And so that has been a huge platform. I'm not going to say a starting point, but a platform that has brought huge public, I suppose, awareness of the issues within HEIs. And of course, HEIs are only microcosms of the entire population. So what we witness outside of universities, we see mirrored inside of universities because, of course, this is behaviour. So that was phase one in terms of the formal framework in Ireland. Phase two was a plan where an implementation plan. So that was putting those actions that were agreed and listed out into a plan, a workable plan. And we're coming towards the end of that now. That plan was in place for 2024 or 2022 to 2024, which outlined implementations such as policies and procedures, supports, reporting pathways, anonymous and both formal reporting pathways, and our collaboration with external expert groups, such as rape crisis networks, rape crisis centres, other departments within the wider community, and of course, An Garda Síochána here in Ireland. Phase two also in Ireland saw the launch of our Speak Out tool, which is the anonymous recording tool that I think it's 19 universities and HEIs in Ireland are currently using. Some universities also have one that may be called, it's the equivalent tool, but it may be Report and Support. And that has given us enormous amounts of informal, anonymous information about behaviours that are happening in campuses, behaviours between staff and students. It covers a wide range of behaviours, not just gender-based violence and sexual violence, but bullying, harassment, discrimination, microaggression, stalking, the list goes on and on. We wanted to include everybody in this so that everybody had a voice and a platform to put down their experiences. It allows people to report and record on behalf of themselves or on something that they witness, which is vital because a lot of people witness behaviours, they may not experience them. The first report, national report of Speak Out will be launched next month. So of course that will be made available to everybody within universities, which will give a picture, I suppose, of a climate picture of what people are experiencing at universities. And we've also had a number of national surveys as well as international surveys in the last couple of years. 2 years ago in Ireland saw the first staff survey ever. We've had many, many student surveys and young people surveys, but 2 years ago saw our first staff survey. So it gave us a picture into what staff are experiencing at colleges, which was really useful. And all of these platforms, all of these surveys, all of these anonymous recording tools allow us to get access to information in order to make informed decisions about where to move forward from this current implementation plan. So then I just put down, as I said, there, phase 3, which is looking at a new implementation plan. We haven't got quite a shape on that yet, but there's lots of debate, lots of conversation, north and south within Europe, about what we might like to see happen. Where is the path forward for this? Because we are very determined to keep this going, to really address gender-based violence and sexual violence and harassment on an ongoing way. And looking at, for me, the most important part is what we call like a whole university approach. That this isn't just an issue for EDI or for counselling services or for medical services. This implementation and this addressing gender-based violence and sexual-based violence needs input from every member of the university, every part of the university, from presidents and directors of universities down. This has to be a whole college approach. Everybody has a say in this. Everybody needs to have an input in this, and everybody needs to be accountable for this. Because I think one of the fears is that, you know, if we put in place an implementation plan and make one department responsible for it, what happens then is everybody goes, that that's they're dealing with that. And people don't see it as this is all of us are responsible. So that's just to give a background of where the formal, I suppose, approach in the last couple of years. But as I said, we all know we have been dealing with this for many, many, many centuries. So targeted initiatives here in TU Dublin, just to give a snapshot, and we're looking at our own EDI department. All first year students since 2019 get a workshop on consent. We use the Active Consent Programme from Galway, which is a great programme, and it's a positive consent programme. So it's not a sanction-based programme. It's using education, using input from students, using feedback from staff surveys, constantly updating it to inform students about the recent laws, recent practices, students' experiences, and feeding that back in. And again, then just to give a brief number, between 2022 and 2023, the last 2 orientation, we here in TU Dublin have reached over 9,000 students over the 2 years with these workshops, which is huge, which is great. And that happens in week 1. So the first or second day that students come into the college, they have a brief workshop. As I said, since 2019, but just to give figures over the last 2 years, over 9,000 students, which is great. So I always kind of go, if one person comes away with one thing, it's had an impact. My hope is that we're generating conversation between students, because it's students who are living on our campuses, who are working, studying on our campuses. So if we can generate a conversation between students about consent, about the new laws in Ireland, like the sharing of images, then we're doing a good job. If we're using it, getting students to debate it. We also put on an e-learning module for staff in 2020, which is a brief, short, I think it's like 30 minutes, 25 minutes, 30 minutes, online workshop for staff that they can run through in their normal training programs. And we just leave that up there and we keep reminding staff of it. So far in Dublin, TU Dublin, over 1,300 staff have completed that. And just to give you a snapshot, that we have about 3,500 staff overall. So we kind of think that's a good starting point, that if staff are accessing it, they're also getting the same information as students. So therefore, it's again trying to disseminate the information out that this is everybody's work. This isn't just our work. We're happy to facilitate and lead this work, but we need everybody to get involved in this. We also then put online a student e-learning module, which is like a Consent Plus program. So it's like the next step after their orientation workshops. And we put that online since 2021. We're offering it as part of an extended orientation. So week 2 or 3 of first years coming in, faculties and schools that run extended orientations have been providing this for their students on a virtual learning platform. So students are asked to sign on to it and to complete it and to maybe answer 1 or 2 questions so that we know that they have gone through it. We've also done in-person bystander intervention workshops during extended orientation last year and this year in week 2 and 3 on electrical engineering. Thank you, Catherine, has been one of the schools and one of the faculties who have started to do this in-person workshop as well. So again, it's just getting back out to students. We use a different program. We use scenarios. We get students to work together. So while we facilitate it, we show some videos and we get students to work in groups to debate what's going on. Who might step in? What does bystander mean? What would that look like? And so trying to get them to come up with the solutions. and then we feed back to them. In terms of other targeted initiatives as part of that implementation plan, we also have a disclosure training, a half-day disclosure training that's available to all staff and all student leaders. And I'm sorry I don't have the figures for that yet. We've done a huge amount of them over the last couple of months. So it's great that staff will self-sign on to it, and some faculties and some schools have decided to bring it into their schools. So they're doing it at a school level or a faculty level, as well as the self-sign on. We also offer bystander intervention training for all staff and all students. And again, that is targeted by some schools and faculties, but it's also available as a self-sign-on workshop. We do 4 live ones during the year and 2 online ones, so 6 in total for staff alone, and we then work on a demand base for students. Now, the purpose of all that, again, is not just to run out workshops. It's to get the conversation going. It's to get people to understand that this is a whole school response that we need. Staff and students can receive disclosures of any kind of behaviour at any stage. And so we feel it's really important to equip those staff with some skills, some listening skills, and a greater understanding of all the support services, because as we say, their role is to signpost. We don't want staff feeling an extra pressure to have to take on any of the issues that come to them, but know that they're one part in the thread of getting staff and student support and help. And again, by doing that, the whole idea is we're creating a behavior that becomes the norm, that people start saying, okay, if that happens, I know where to go. So we're again disseminating it across the university. And we're hoping now to target what we would consider at-risk groups. And as you know, gender-based violence and sexual-based violence and harassment can hit anybody. But there are certain target groups, risk groups that we're looking at that maybe wouldn't feel like they have the same voice. Or with intersectionality, we know statistics will show us, research will show us, there's certain groups that may be more at risk. And the Speak Out tool also supports that, because we see the intersectionality of race, of gender coming through. Oh, they can't, sorry.
Yeah, they're just messaging.
Sorry. No, apologies, thanks, Niamh. Apologies, everyone. I'll just leave that up for a second then for people who haven't seen that. I'll make the slides available anyway, so you can send them on. Okay. So the next stage again, development, moving it forward as we look at policies and procedures, because we do need policies and procedures to hold this all together. But I do feel policies and procedures need to be developed parallel and at the same time as all of the training and the support services, because we cannot put policies and procedures in place for people to report formally, for investigations to happen, and then people on the ground not know what to do with that, or not know what are appropriate sanctions, what are appropriate supports, what intermediate support we may need to put in place. So that development of policy and procedures is currently ongoing in TU Dublin, and we're looking at it in line of what's best practice internationally, but also looking at the national consideration, because we do have a national group that look at all of this. So we're working alongside all of those to try and develop a policy and procedure. While it can't be the same in every college, but that it has the same principles in every HEI. So every student entering 3rd level, no matter whether it be university, further education, higher education, they will all receive the same groundwork around policies, procedures, how investigations are carried out. It needs to be transparent. It needs to have a flow to it. Most importantly, all of the procedures need to be trauma informed. We have to look at how we support people who are brave enough to come forward. If we're asking them to trust us and bring these issues forward, we have to look at it in a victim survivor way. We have to look at it as trauma informed, or we're not doing our job. We're putting people at more risk. They have to be workable procedures. They have to, in practice, work. So that they're supporting both the reporting party and the responding party and any witnesses involved. They have to work. And that might seem like a silly thing to say, but you know, it's really important that that happens. They have to incorporate precautionary safety measures or sanctions. Again, if people are brave enough to come forward and there's ongoing issues, we have to be able to look and say, while you're going through this process, how can we best support you? How can we keep you safe? What do you need in place? Even prior to an investigation taking place, quite important. We have to ensure safety for all parties involved. It has to be fair. Sanctions have to be fair and they have to be proportionate. One type of sanctions will not fill all types of reporting. So particularly for gender-based violence, for sexually based violence, for harassment, for stalking, for issues that there may be a huge safety element to. We have to look at what are proportionate sanctions and what are fair sanctions. And they may be very different to other types of sanctions that the universities will look at in terms of other types of complaints. We have to again maybe look at the ideas of mediation work that might be appropriate. You know, I'm looking at the idea here in TU Dublin of mediation in terms of particularly staff to staff. Staff can be working with each other for upwards of 20 or 30 years. They're not transient like our students. So we need to look at how do we repair a relationship where possible? How do we put those safety measures in place that staff can look at and kind of say, I'd like to try this. This isn't my only option. I'd like options around how I can look at this. You know, get support for it, but to repair a relationship. Because we're not doing our job if people go through formal reporting and still have to go into the same unsafe place or what they deem as unsafe. So we have to look at all of these options. Another one for future planning is to look at the idea of restorative practice, particularly around intersectionality. You know, what can we put in place that again is about restoring relationships, that's about educating people, that's about taking responsibility for actions without feeling like, you know, somebody is being shamed for it hugely, that, you know, there's an opportunity for learning, that people can see where their mistakes are and learn from it without it being all or nothing in terms of no report versus formal reporting. We currently collaborate with a lot of external agencies, experts such as Gardaí, the rape crisis centres, on initiatives and support and how we move forward with this. And again, I think that's a vital element of our work, is to engage the community, because particularly say with sexual-based violence or sexual-based misconduct, when we look at students who are out and about, a lot of these incidents can happen out in the community and not necessarily on campus. Some happen on campus for sure, or in student accommodation, but a lot may also happen out in the community. So it's really important that we engage with the services that will be responding out in the community so that they're aware of our initiatives, they're aware of what supports are available to staff and students, and we can all work together on that. Just very brief statistics on our Speak Out here in TU Dublin. This is not the national one, this is just to give you an idea. You can see there the majority, 64% is students reporting. Which is great. There's, you know, it's new, it's a new concept, even though it's 2 years old, the concept is new. So there's still questions for people going, is it anonymous? Is it safe? Who's getting this information? What's going to happen to this information? And to me, hearing that is as vital as people reporting on Speak Out. Because if people feel I'm still too nervous to do that, that gives us a picture of the climate of people's lack of trust in the current systems. Lack of belief. Do you know what I mean? In what will happen? If I come forward even anonymously, what will happen? That's fear. So I think that gives us something to work with. I don't see it as a negative. I think it's another element we have to take on board and say, okay, it's our job to instill trust. It's our job to tell people, if you tell us, we will look after it. And we have to prove that we will look after it. And I think that will help create trust. Again, just looking at it in terms of gender-based, if we look at the reports by gender, by far, the amount of reports, the number of reports are female, and this goes across staff, students, and all others. So Speak Out allows anybody attached to the universities in Ireland or the ITs in Ireland. So it's contractors, it's visitors to the university, it's anybody working at the university. So we can see the female reporting versus male and non-binary, prefer not to say. The other, I have put in a lot of others, so that would include different genders, trans students, trans staff. Anywhere where the number is very low, we don't pull it out. So other will incorporate many other, but it's just to keep it anonymous. So again, it just shows that the prefer not to say, again, I don't see as a negative and not a useful stat. I think it's very useful. I think, again, it speaks to people not feeling safe to come forward. And I think we have to look at it like that. So again, looking at the types of behaviour that are most commonly reported for TU Dublin on Speak Out. Bullying, by far the greatest one. Discrimination, and then sexual harassment. And again, I haven't broken this down by staff, student, or visitors, other, to preserve privacy more than anonymity. But we can see that the other most stalking and assault are reported, the numbers are low, but just to include them, that these are behaviors that we deal with a lot, even though the numbers might be low. And again, moving forward, okay. So what we would hope to achieve is we're looking at robust policies and procedures aligned with and complementing all of the other university policies. I think that has to. So as I said, when I say workable, they have to align and complement dignity and respect for staff and students. They have to complement all of the other disciplinary ones so that it can be quite clear when somebody comes forward that we can make a decision and say, okay, this might best fit here. And that's why we're going to investigation under that. That, as I said, it's a whole university approach. There is collective responsibility with individual accountability. And I think that's vital. You know, in order to have collective responsibility, we have to have individual accountability. Because if we don't, it's not a collective. We're not doing it as a whole school. And that doesn't mean naming and shaming people. Accountability is not about naming and shaming people, but it is about looking at, if you come forward and a complaint is upheld, this is what will happen. So looking at supports, looking at deterrence, looking at how we move forward. Embed initiatives and trainings within the curriculum. So again, we're working hard with the academic schools to try and find space and a place that's suitable to put in the initiatives so that it isn't just an orientation, but that this is an ongoing repeated structure, that it's progressing all of the time. So that orientation might be a talk around consent. Then we might have an element of bystander intervention. Then it's about disclosure. So people, because we know from the surveys, say for instance, in student surveys, 79% of students will disclose to their friends, which makes sense. So if 79% of people are disclosing to their friends, we need to give those young people the skills to handle a disclosure, to not feel that they're taking on the responsibility, but they know how to go forward with it. And so that we're constantly moving forward. I would love to see the engagement of students in all of this, to hear the students' voice. Engagement is a huge part of this. Talking to staff, talking to students, talking to all members of the university, hearing people's perspectives, hearing what they want. What would work? Help us. Tell us how we can help you to make this a safer place. Hearing what people's experiences are, not assuming that we know what's right, I think is a huge part of this. Because if people have a say in what's going on, if people feel their voice is being heard and their point has been taken on board, we will get collective responsibility, but we will also allow for individual accountability where that needs to happen. And very importantly, you know, the idea of living spaces that embody the university ethos is really important, designed and owned by the whole community. Now, I know TU Dublin is a new campus on old grounds with some fabulous listed buildings. So I'm not suggesting anybody can go out and spray paint any of these buildings or anything like that. We're creating spaces that are like living spaces that will evolve, that will allow students and staff to see their ethos, will allow see their principles up and say, this is how we want our university to be. This is what we want it to look like. And to have that visible on campus, not hidden behind doors. And again, that's allowing buy-in from staff and students. And if people feel they own it, they're more likely to act out of it as well. And all research will tell us that, you know, the more behaviors become socially unacceptable, the more they decrease in numbers because there's a collective around. It's like drink driving laws. It's like, you know, the more, I know, Sarah, I'll finish up, the more that has become unacceptable, the more people are aware and the more people go, you just don't do that. So it's using what we know to work. And then finally, and I'll stop talking now, I did warn Sarah that I just keep talking, so apologies, is having it visible and transparent reporting and supporting structures. It's really important that we're not afraid to be transparent about the cases coming in. Now, not individual naming, you know, keeping them completely private, but not being afraid to say, we have this many cases. This is the sanctions that were handed out. This is the amount of investigations that took place, because then people can see it working. People can see if this happens, something will happen. If I come and say it, something will happen. And I think that's really important. And when we look to our counterparts in the UK and in Europe, this has worked really successfully. Publishing these up on their website so people can see, this is what we do when people come forward. This is how we support them. This is how we handle cases. These might be the mitigation circumstances. That has worked really well in buying and trust. And the more they did that, the more people wanted to come forward because they felt it was purposeful coming forward, that it will work for them. So that's where we've been so far with TU Dublin. Apologies, Sarah, for going over time. I'll just close this now.
So thank you very much, Catherine. Thank you very much for your work. And thank you very much for your passion. and which is very good when you are carrying somebody like this, that passion, and that is so clear in when we hear you speak. I'm not going, I have questions for you, but I'm going to reserve the questions until the end because I probably will have questions, and I'm sure we have people here from University of Reims in France, from Sarajevo School of Science and Technology, from Bosnia and Herzegovina, and also people from University of Genoa in Italy, and I'm sure, and they are all working in EDI. So I'm sure that also there will be questions from the floor. So without more, waiting, Philip, do you have a presentation as well, Philip? Oh, great. Okay, so Philip is going to speak about initiatives at TU Dublin on race.
If it connects, I'll use it. If it doesn't, I'll just talk through.
Okay, that's fine. And do you have any problem, Philip?
How do I connect? Yes, sorry, it's one of these things that you do last minute. Wait, go ahead. Yes, yes, you can go ahead.
Okay. I just need to check this. Is that okay?
Yeah. Yeah, thanks very much for that. And also thanks to Professor Yvonne Galligan for inviting me to this session. I'm not going to be as eloquent as Catherine, but I'll try my best. As you are informed, my name is Philip Owende, and I'm the Assistant Head of Academic Affairs, and my area is on the quality framework. So the policies and procedures that Catherine was talking about comes quite a bit substantively from our side, but it's easy to make policies. Again, as Catherine mentioned, it's easy to draw policies and to design them in the way that you want, but implementing them without buy-in is the critical issue. Now, again, as you were told by Professor Yvonne Galligan, that I've been a co-chair of the interculturalism and race equity working group of the university. Now, that was part of our 5-year strategic plan, strategic plan for the entire EDI with the initial focus on race equity. Remember, we are drawing from limited resources, so we had to actually focus on specific areas that we can be able to deal with. Now, what I'm going to talk about the overview that I'm giving you there, I won't talk about everything there, but I have the slides that you will be provided for afterwards. That has quite a lot of hyperlinks that you might link to exactly what we have implemented, how we have implemented those, and then if any matters arise in terms of where we are heading with this, we can always be able to answer them. So I know I'm talking to the converted, so I don't need to define any of those terms, but I'll just jump onto what is important for us. Now, anybody who started using the computers in the 90s can remember the word Intel Inside. If you read Intel Inside, you knew that it was a brand of quality, and you knew that it was something that you can rely upon to give you sustainable service over time, okay? Now, we wanted to draw context from that and saying that how best as an institution can we approach this EDI in a holistic manner to be able to address the hot points, but at the same time to be able to carry people with us in this quest. So again, going back to the mechanism of things that you know, if you look at your washing machine, for example, the drum rotates, some of them go up to 1500 RPM, but they are safe. They are safe in the sense that safety has been designed into that machine that will not permit you to open it when it's running, and therefore will eliminate potential injury. Drawing the same context on EDI, we wanted to comply with EDI, but how do you comply with EDI? You can only be sure that you're compliant with EDI if your approach is EDI compliance by design. EDI is not something that you do your main work here and you retrofit or you bring it as a secondary thought. It's something that has to grow organically within your setup. It starts from the person, goes to the functional area, goes to the institution, and then goes to the national network. So it's the confluence of those 4 areas: personal, functional area, institutional areas, and then the national. So we wanted to combine all these together so that we can have a concerted action that can be able to address this in a much more holistic way. So where did we start? We started by joining an advanced HE program that was part of Athena Swan intersectionality. Now, remember, we're already talking about intersectionality. We are not talking about race. We are not talking about gender. We are not talking about ability, disability. We are talking about intersectionality. Intersectionality is where all those areas combine together to give you a very precarious person or a very precarious community in that intersection of all those. Now, those, when you talk about inclusion, those are the type of people the type of persons or the type of groups that you want to bring along and be able to solve their issue. So based on that, we developed what we call there as the literacy glossary, and it's freely available. Now, I'm not sure whether the internet will work for me there. So you can be able to download that document if you so wish. And so starting with the glossary, we were able to reach the terms that we wanted everybody to know. Because for you to be able to implement policies, for you to be able to even arrange for penalties or mitigating factors, you have to have a common language where everybody knows that this is offensive, this is not, this is how I can relate with this, and this is how I go about reporting, this is how I go about resolving where we disagree and that type of thing. So once we had that thing down, then there are a couple of questions that we thought we needed to answer. How do we ensure that the policies take shape? Now, in the first instance, we knew that partnership with stakeholders is essential. That's key to success in implementing any of the policy. Now, and then, of course, education for people to be aware of what is wrong, what is right, and what needs to be addressed. It's generated through what you can call cultural competence that allows you to draw the overall utility and benefit for your institution. And then, of course, you have the promotion of diversity. You actively go out to recruit diverse academics, professional services through partnership, and you put them together in different forums to try and address some of those. And remember that that approach, at times, it requires talking about very sensitive issues, very hard issues. But if you talk about them, then you can actually be able to get resolutions or way to go around and to navigate through that. Then, of course, we also considered the importance of total inclusion in the workplace, values, respect that Catherine spoke about, community of practice, resource groups, mentorships, and those. Essentially, you are looking at regime that enables employees listening sessions and action where it is deserved to correct or to be able to promote good practices. And then, of course, what we wanted as part of this EDI compliance is that, I'm not sure, I mean, all of you come from different institutions, but what I can tell you, something that I've learned over time as an academic, is that if you want action on anything, make sure that the desire is part of a strategic plan, otherwise you're wasting your time. So what we did then was to try and get the governance and the high-level management buy-in into what we were proposing as part of our interventions. And then on top of that, then we were looking at institutional culture. And then we are looking at the processes where you're talking about the reporting process, the policies that go with it. And then we went for targeted interventions where you're talking about behaviors, trying to direct people to role models, trying to direct people to people who have resolved, rather to areas that the same problem has been resolved. For example, our association with Advanced HE is based on the premise that race and racial difficulties have been addressed in the UK for much longer than they've been addressed in Ireland. So we have their learning to try and draw from their experience so that we don't reinvent the wheel again. Then in terms of how do we monitor the EDI activities and how they have worked, again, going back to the importance of the four functions: the person, the functional area, the institution, and the national drivers. We joined the part of HEA supported survey that enable us to interrogate the level of racism or the level of misunderstanding of racism or the level of in which different institutions have taken steps to try and address those as part of a national survey. Now, that gave us actionable data that told us that actually, for you to be able to gel and to bind all these institutions at a national level, you need to develop principles that everybody can relate to, everybody can buy into, and everybody can sign so that they can be able to enact them in a supported, a positive way that maintains a record of where you have started from, how you are progressing without undue harassment in terms of that you have to achieve this at this time. It was essentially based on what you could call a mission-based compact, mission-based agreement, that you look at what you can achieve in a piecemeal, provide your graduated scale, and keep on revising that, seeing where that is taking you. And if it addresses the principles that have been negotiated and signed, then you will see that you are making the right steps. So you will see those in a couple of things. And I've just tried to narrate the growth that we have had in terms of the survey that was done, in terms of the principles that were signed, and then interlinked to the gender equality that Yvonne spoke about. Now, all those, if you get those, now, for example, if I pick the implementation plan, again, they're all happening. You'll be able to get a full document. Sorry, that's not what I wanted. I wanted the principles so that I give you an idea of what they are. There would be 6 agreed principles that covers everybody in a national sense, and everybody signed into that anti-racism principles. Okay. So if you look at that document, what is covered there, let me just make it look. There are 6 principles. First of all, the first one, the primary one, being that we all know that racism is a problem. It's an issue in higher education, and it can be context specific, and it's a problem where we are in Ireland as a country. The second one is that we also, the second principle is also accepting that higher education decisions which allow race inequality to exist cannot perform to their full potential. So if you go 1 or go through 6, and especially the last one, noting that it's a complex nature, intersectionality that I spoke about, that quite a lot of things must be taken into account when developing your actions and policies that relate to those. Now, then on top of that, coming back again to sorry, I should have gone on a presentation slide on that. On top of that, again, Catherine mentioned that we are not looking at staff only. We are looking at students, we are looking at staff, we are looking at academic staff, we are looking at staff in the professional services. All have to be brought in together. So in terms of students, we are addressing everything from admission, for example, disability access route, higher education access route. What would be the admission areas that you can look at that addresses race, or even that addresses equality, or addresses inclusion, to ensure that the students we get reflects the national, the Irish society as a whole, as it were. So we put in place some of those issues in terms of policies, in terms of interventions. But again, I think, again, what Catherine mentioned would have been, at what point can somebody feel that they are safe to talk about what they feel has been offensive? So we have what is called a mechanism for reporting harm or discrimination. It's called a speak out. It's a confidential space. It's an understanding space. And it is where anybody who might have any race-related or infringement on those can actually feel safe and go and report those, and there will be an immediate action. And of course, the action does not mean that immediately somebody else is punished for this, but there could be a mediation, or there could be a remediation opportunity that enables somebody who made a mistake to recognize their mistake and to be able to. Some of the problems that we have encountered actually are quite simplistic, that they can be addressed by a simple apology at the first instance, and you move on with the other. But of course, the other side of Richter scale would be something that might go legal, that might be just out of the scale. So it varies on those, but you need to have the capability to recognize and to be able to manage those cases as they present. Okay. Then again, apart from students, rather in terms of students, we know that race and race inequality, racism can present in different ways, and in most cases, you see, most higher education institutions are insular. They're insular in the sense that within the institution, people get together very, very well. But the occasional difficulties come when, say, students go to placement, for example, where some places they have never encountered somebody else of a different color, of a different religion or religious denomination, of that type of thing. So again, we wanted to put in place policies and procedures and even management mechanisms that can enable the students to be able to adapt to those areas. Okay. Then as part of our, now this is where my key role is in terms of how we want to adapt as an institution. Now, remember, we are talking about EDI compliant by design. Initially we started that we wanted to be recognized as an exemplar in equality, diversity, and inclusion. Okay, so we agreed on a few KPIs that could enable our schools to be able to recognize that. So if you go, remember that the school is the base unit of our function as a university. So if we go again, I'm just giving you an example. If you go to, we expect that if you conduct a school review, there are aspects that you look at. Now, for the first time in Ireland, we have been able to implement a review with components, a school review with components that specifically targets EDI, including race and race equality and how best to address them. And I'll just take you through through that very quickly. Remember, we are all used to policies and procedures, or even academic policies and procedures that simply relate to learning, teaching, and assessment. And of course, including research. But if you look at ours at the moment, we are going slightly beyond that and looking at the contextual strategy for equality, diversity, and inclusivity, where you are telling, when it comes to the school self-assessment, you are telling them that there are a couple of questions, rather, there are fundamental aims that we need to agree on. We have 5 of them there. The first one is how the school has contextualized the university EDI agenda, fitting the programs and operations. The second one is they have to reflect on the school's contribution to the monitoring initiatives such as data gathering on staff and student experiences. This is simply for the purposes of ensuring effective implementation of our strategic plan. Remember that our strategic plan is where we are starting from. If you don't have it, you will not achieve it. If you have it in the strategic plan, then you will always be able to recalibrate yourself and know where you are at any particular point. We also go into the processes for oversight, accountability to schools, and then assessing effectiveness of those. We would like the reflection on the approach to educating staff and students in the promotion of EDI. And I want to draw you now, if you get a chance again, you might just have a look at how far we have gone with this. Let me see if I can get that. For some reason, I can't get this. Anyway, what I wanted to show you is how we have managed to develop resources for training of students, the class representatives, for example, to be able to address EDI issues. Now, remembering again that when students enroll to the university, they might not have that information. It might be information that is touchy for some of them, and you actually need to start educating by training the student, the class reps as a starting point, and providing them with the resources that they can be the focal point or they can be the pivot for any complaints that come from students. Now, remembering that the students ordinarily, they might not want to come straight to academic staff to make their complaint. They might want to share their experience with the student, and then the fellow students having the correct education about the intervention measures, they would be able to know that, well, what you're telling me is actually more serious than you think. I think I need to escalate this to somebody else. So that is the process that we are talking about. I'm sorry that I'm for some reason I'm unable to. Okay, anyway, for some reason I'm unable to connect to that. But having given the schools the aims and objectives of that context for EDI that covers race equality, we've given them even a sample of prompting questions that can be able to enhance their reflection on any part of what we are talking about. Now, for example, they can ask, does the school have or maintain visibility practices, behaviors, and role models promoting equality culture? If you answer that, then you're getting somewhere. How are the Athena's One Charter principles considered or implemented in your school? What targeted support does the school offer to marginalized students, for example? How does the school educate students on dynamics of both privilege and marginalization? Remember, people talk about white privilege or unprivileged, whichever way you want to look at it. How does the school maintain confidential, dedicated reporting mechanism with appropriate constructive response processes on infringement? Does the school have adequate resources for supporting students and staff who report incidences of discrimination or harassment? What strategy does the school have for ensuring that it meets its quota in the related KPIs for EDI? And has the school enrolled any students in the international protection system? So those are the things that if any school addresses those and, in terms of the race context, in terms of the EDI in totality, they will have actually been making progress on what we wanted them to achieve. So again, going back to the context or the substance of my presentation there, again, I'll just skip and then I'll stop talking. Maybe I'll handle things when you ask right in the end. In the same context, we have, as part of the quality framework, there are things that we do regularly, there are things that we do annually, there are things that we do periodically, there are things that we depend more on external interrogation of whether we are effective or not. Now, we rely on all those and work in totality together, because at the center of what we do, and this is my perceived strength of TUW, we went out to try and aim for TUW student experience to be unique. For us to be able to achieve that, we needed to provide academic staff guidance. We needed to provide professional service staff guidance for those. But at the same time, this figure that you're looking at here is symbolic. At the same time, we provide a breathing outlet that enables the student, if they are not happy with interacting with academic staff, if they are not happy with interacting with professional services staff, they can actually go broader somewhere else that they can be able to be assisted as part of those. And just to let you know that we had our first, what is called institutional review by the Quality and Qualifications Ireland. This is an external peer review process that ran from 2021, completed in 2022 with a review report. And one of the things that was picked out was our excellence in handling EDI as a budding technological university in Ireland. So we are very content and very happy with ourselves. And you can actually read that report as part of the hyperlinks that I've given you there. So I'll stop there for now, and hopefully we'll handle any other questions that come in the end. But you'll have, I think it's a long, it's a long slide presentation. You'll have that and play with the hyperlinks. And if there are queries, please get back to me and we'll be able to discuss. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Philip. Also, a lot of work going into race equity and actually intersectionality. Thank you for bringing intersectionality up, and also data and data collection. And so this is a very, very long road full of challenges. So I'm sure there will be questions after for Philip. So next speaker is Catherine Deegan, who is going to speak about universal design for learning. Thank you.
Just have 2 slides, everybody, and I was just I was going to go without, but then it just occurred to me, if I'm going to speak about universal design for learning just with my voice, that goes flies in the face of universal design. You're supposed to have multimodal communication. So first of all, thank you to the organisers for inviting me. It was an honour to be asked and to speak with my co-panelists as well, because I often find with universal design, I'm with a lot of other universal design people, and we're all talking, you know, speaking to the converted. So it's lovely to be on a cross EDI panel, because universal design as well, it's something in my work I'm trying to, we're trying to bring in other aspects of EDI into universal design, because that is where it's most comfortable as well. It's just something that Philip was saying there that made me recall, when did I first get into this? I was asked this recently at an assistive technology meeting last week. I think I was about 14, which is a very long time ago now. And I was working with an occupational therapist. I worked with the Spina Bifida Association in Waterford, Ireland, where I grew up. And we were working with a particularly frustrating piece of equipment with the group. We were bringing them swimming, and it was a hoist that wasn't working very well. They weren't great, the equipment wasn't very well put together back then. And it was the occupational therapist said to me, she said, there is no retrofitting, there is no post-design work that will deal with or get around good design from the outset, And I think this is a lot of the point that we're getting onto about EDI and any kind of strategy and any kind of institution. Do it from the start, do it well, build it into your strategy, or else you're always going to be, as we say in Ireland, on the back foot. You're always going to be trying to catch up. So the approach to UDL in this institution, as it is in other institutions, because I work at a national level on this now, is try to do it by design and try to do it from the ground up, but it's vital to have the support from the top. Now, it's a top-down and bottom-up approach, as we say, with universal design for learning. But just for those of you who may not have heard it, it's another thing we always start with a little bit of an overview of what it is. I think from the brain, I do as an engineer physicist, I have done some brain research, so I do explain it from the learner perspective and what it actually is. Universal design for learning comes from universal design, which came from architecture, which is the basic concept of it's good design. It's design that is adaptable, flexible, and works for everybody, or as many as possible. If something is universally designed, then the idea behind it is that you need as little adaptations or modifications as possible for anybody who may have physical or other types of challenges. And it's as simple as that in a nutshell. For learning, it extends a little bit more in that it's based on learner cognition. And it's the effective recognition and strategic networks in the brain, and they're highlighted there. So it's a fascinating concept, but based on it, there's developed a very flexible, adaptable framework there about that. It's very, very large. I never show the entire framework there because it's actually so large now that it's being reviewed, because it's a little bit overwhelming. I never show it to a new member of staff who I'm putting to induction because it just puts them off. But all learners are different, so it supports a diversity, inclusion, and progression.
and really a more diverse, both teaching and learning culture, which is why I'm so attracted to it. And going back to those early years when I was working with both students and adults with disabilities, and now up through my career as an engineer who love technology, because technology is a big part of this now, and working now with both adults and students coming through. I do believe that everyone should have an opportunity to study and learn and achieve to the best of their ability and within and beyond their abilities if they can. And this is the way it can be done. And also it supports an inclusive, accessible and diverse culture in all institutions, not just in the learning environment, also in the working environment. So the learning really now should be replaced by education, because we're all in education and we're all in that environment. So I'll talk about that in a second. But basically on the effective networks, we stimulate interest and motivation for learning. How do we do that? We present information and content in different ways. That's why I'm not just speaking. I also have visuals. The really important piece on this is for students, we enable, and it's up to us as educators, we enable students to differentiate the ways in which they can express and demonstrate what they know. And that means we give them different ways to engage and express. And that comes down to assessment. So we do lots of work on universal design and assessment work here in TU Dublin. So this is just the tiniest snapshot of the type of work, and it's kind of where we are now, and I haven't even captured everything where we are now. There has been much work done on in the past, and there's a lot being planned at the moment as well. But say my first formal exposure to universal design in teaching and learning would have been when I worked in the National Forum for Teaching and Learning in 2016. I was on a secondment with this national organization, and they were developing a digital badge, which is a small micro credential in teaching and learning there. And they were developing that badge then. I completed it myself a couple of years later. That is now ongoing in TU Dublin as it is in all other institutions. And I think we have about 50 or 60 completing it this year. We had as many as 150, say, during the peak COVID times, because it is delivered online. I now deliver workshops annually to this group who completed on assistive technology, as assistive tech is quite a significant pillar of universal design, particularly since COVID and the pandemic times. Technology usage, of course, has magnified significantly. So that would be a large part of it. The digital badges and qualifications. There are now master's qualifications in universal design available in the country. University education model, it is universal design is an accepted, and this is what I mean about being accepted really at the highest level, the strategic level. Our UEM is under development, but at a mature, reasonably mature stage of development. And universal design is a significant part of this. So that is also part, it's woven into the fabric really of TU Dublin's ethos and practice. I couldn't possibly capture all the work being done on universal design. I completed a master's in assistive tech and practice, academic practice, myself a few years ago. And the one thing that was really quite shocking is the extent at the individual level that people are practicing this while maybe not even understanding what the framework is itself. So there you are. With regard to formal activity, TU Dublin has a great showing in communities of practice, which would have started really during the pandemic. I set up the assistive technology community of practice, the UDL community of practice, and now also a HiFlex community of practice, which really would embody a lot of universal design concepts as well. So these communities of practice serve to propagate and embody a lot of universal design principles. And I deliver workshops regularly to these communities across, and through that we just propagate, share knowledge, update our knowledge, and updating this material all the time. And these will comprise well over 200-300 staff at any one time coming in and out of these communities of practice. The accessibility thrives. This is just an image of the TU Dublin accessibility framework that was developed. This was a direct output of the assistive technology community of practice a few years ago. This was developed as part of that COP work, and it resides in the library. It's part of the library. Our library has been an incredible champion of universal design and accessibility work that I did as part of that community of practice. And I was just chatting with Yvonne about this earlier, and we've talked a lot about culture and compliance, and I just mentioned accessible practice and compliance. Compliance is important, and certainly when it comes to accessibility as distinct from universal design, accessibility is something that is required. It's a requirement of legislation. It's EU legislation, which feeds down into Irish legislation. I could put up all the, legislation, terms, etc. However, what we do promote via the communities of practice is really a carrot rather than a stick approach, which is we encourage compliance we encourage practice, good practice, strong practice, and inclusive practice while informing people of compliance. And we're hoping that the compliance will follow the culture rather than the other way around, because we really find that's more successful that way. And in that way, for example, I had a request just last week from a school to ask about exam papers, how they look at making their own exam papers accessible. Not a word about compliance, but that is what they're looking for. Is it not visible? Yeah, so I'll leave that. So that would be the Thrives framework, and this is linked to all the relevant technology pieces. And again, it has to be updated. That's the only thing when you're dealing with tech is the constant updating, which is no harm. The thing about a community of practice is it's a less formal, but hugely enriching experience. And to any institutions who have not gone to use the community practices before, I would strongly recommend them. Finally, then, with regard to TU Dublin, what I'm in the thick of at the moment is a national piece of work, which is the national UDL. It's actually the national UDE. It's the University Design for Education in Tertiary Education Charter. And this is a national project. It's led by another institution, and we're a partner and collaborator in this. So I'm at the TU Dublin lead in that, and what we've been doing for the past year, we've been developing a University Design for Education Charter. It would be similar to the work that we've been doing with the gender work, but this is coming under 4 pillars. And it's not just covering learning. It will be teaching and learning will be one of the pillars. There is also digital and IT, which of course will encompass all functions in an institution. There is also the physical environment. So there's digital IT environment, physical environment, teaching and learning, and also student services. So it does have a student focus, but it does broaden out, and it's not just within the classroom or in the assessment environment, because the student environment in an institution, of course, is broader than what is going on in the classroom. So we just decided it needed to spread out around that. Now the students, particularly because students are back on campus, the physical environment needed to be incorporated as well. So that is ongoing. We've completed staff consultations there over the summer, and we're now in the student consultation part of that work now. So that's an exciting piece of work, particularly to talk to other third level institutions, and we're also talking to the further education sector there as well. We have a large representation from there as well. So it's a truly inclusive, everyone beyond second level education is involved on this. It's an all Ireland, and I was actually in charge of analysing the demographic spread of that data as well. So that was really interesting piece of number crunching as well. So that was really good. So by and large, in addition to on this campus, which is a very, very new piece of work, is we have a new campus called the Design and Construct Centre. It's not fully kitted out, yes, but it's basically a large structure that is going to become a living lab. It will be largely in the built environment area, and that is destined to be a university design space as well. So I've been asked to come on the working group on that as it moves to design stage as well. So what was lovely about that is the project manager of that straight away just said universal design has to be in the centre, and it needs to be a universally designed physical space and also the teaching and learning space. So all of the elements of the charter have to be embodied in that. And this is really, I think, the first time ground up before it even goes to design stage. And we need to find designers and builders who have that built into the spec. I think that's the first time I'll be working on something really actually designing something from that. That's really, really exciting for me. So I'll be really happy to work on that. Just the final word, as Philip was chatting even about I'm doing university design workshop now in 2 weeks' time with the current cohort of Digital Badge. And when we talk about accessibility, I'll be folding accessibility into that. Universal design, hopefully for learning, has moved on from just something we do to accommodate students with disabilities. It used to be that. Now it moved to teaching, good teaching practice, inclusive teaching practice. COVID, slow to say COVID was a good thing, of course it wasn't. It did accelerate judicious, thoughtful use of technology. And it did improve teaching practice in some aspects. It did broaden the use of technology. It did facilitate students who may not be able to access, they would be my observations. There is still some work to be done. I'll give one practical example. You might caption, put alternative text on an image. But where universal design needs to cross in and where there needs to be improvements, things like selecting images, videos, that type of content in our lecture notes. Thoughtful choice on things like imagery. I still have work to do, and I am tutoring colleagues on things like choosing appropriate imagery and diverse imagery in our lecture notes. We've had the thing about gender, stop having white men in coats. Now we need to pick racially diverse imagery as well. All of this feeds into universal design as well. And it's not to have this siloed approach, like, universal design is here, the racial piece is separate. It's to kind of bring all these pieces together now is a piece of work. I think institutions need to do that. So that's why I'm so happy to be here. So, okay.
Disappointed. No. No, second. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much, Catherine. And thank you very much to all the three members of the panel. It has been extremely interesting, and especially for all of us, at least for us in Brinke, who are now involved in projects on EDI, and we have to produce like good practice in TU Dublin. Wow, there is a lot of examples of good practice. I have a few questions, but I really want to give the opportunity to the audience to ask questions, because I'm sure that there are a few of them. So if you have any questions to anybody in the panel, please go ahead. Unfortunately, we don't have a mic, this is the only one. And I don't know what is the best way to do it. Whether if you have a question, you come here and ask your question, or because I think even if you speak very loud, people online won't be able to hear you. Another thing is that you can ask the question from your seat and I can repeat the question here, probably just to avoid you just coming here and going back again. And also I encourage people, we have a few people online, so I encourage people online, if they have any question, please put your question on the chat and I will do the same. I will read your question to the members of the panel, and so that they can answer for you. Okay. Let me open the chat here. The questions. For the moment, any questions? Yes. Oh, that is a long question. So to repeat, Liz, would you mind coming here and putting again, just a summary? You can summarize, it's just for the people online. Thank you. Sorry about that.
Hello, everyone online. No, I had a question for Catherine Bulger in relation to sexual violence and harassment, but it goes across all our work. Catherine spoke about sanctions and investigations in relation to inappropriate behaviour, whether that's sexual violence or harassment or racism, etc. So I was just wondering what that might look like. How do we publish that sort of information? What can we share? Because we have to build confidence in our reporting structures. So anything that we can do to build that confidence, I'd just be interested to learn a little more.
Thanks, Liz. I think there is a couple of layers to that. So for instance, just to reiterate, say the Speak Out tool that runs across all the HEIs in Ireland is an anonymous reporting tool, but there is no action following from that. Okay, so that's like it would signpost to anybody completing it to all of the support services within their HEI and the local area. So say for us here in TU Dublin and RCSI, the Greater Dublin area, there is no follow-on action from that. So what we're looking at in terms of is, I suppose, disclosures, informal reports, and formal reporting. And there are many examples of best practice in that. UCD here in Dublin already do that and publish it, and in the UK and in Europe. And I suppose what that effectively would look like is, having a transparent system so that there is as accurate as possible reporting, first of all. So we need to look at streamlining where complaints come through, where disclosures come through, who's counting those numbers, and looking at the investigations in terms of, I suppose, I know here in TU Dublin, investigations are carried out potentially by staff and by heads of schools who may not be equipped or fully trained to carry those out. So I think the first stage of, say, investigations is skilling staff across the different campuses up with the tools in order to effectively carry out investigations, because currently we're asking, and I mean, I think this runs across a wide portion of the sector, where staff and heads of schools traditionally have been asked to carry out investigations, and they may not have the knowledge or the expertise, particularly in areas of gender-based violence, sexual harassment, race, equity, and so we're asking people to carry out investigations where they're not equipped or skilled to do so. And therefore, they don't necessarily know the trigger points. If we look at, as I said, it's so important that any of these issues are investigated from a trauma-informed way, a survivor-informed way. We need to look at what, as you talked about, Catherine, the brain, the different areas of the brain that are activated when people are traumatized, that people may not tell the story in the same way that we would like to hear it, that they may leave bits out, that the time moves. It's not a linear retelling of the story, and that can sometimes be misinterpreted as, is there enough evidence for this? Are they telling the truth? And that's not blaming staff or heads of school in any way, but it's about making sure the people that we expect to carry out investigations are fully skilled up, are given the opportunity to have the evidence to carry them out. And therefore, we're looking at appropriate sanctions. We need to have appropriate sanctions. And that doesn't necessarily mean that the sanctions are greater than what they currently are, but it's about, as you spoke, Philip, as well, it's about restorative. It's about being able to remediate. It's about people learning, because what we know when we look at investigations, when we look at complaints coming in, when we look at disclosures coming in, that we operate on an impact base. But very often the person, the alleged accused, respondent, they're not looking at intent and they're not looking at impact. So very often people say, well, I didn't mean to insult somebody. I didn't know that was inappropriate. I didn't know that was culturally inappropriate. I wouldn't perceive that as sexual harassment. But it's not about intent. It's informing people that this is about impact on people. And therefore, the sanctions need to reflect the impact on the person reporting it. So as I said, it may not mean greater sanctions. It may mean different sanctions, more appropriate sanctions, in-term sanctions, so that people will feel safe within their study place, within their workplace, to still come in and know that somehow they've been heard, because we know from research. We know from rape crisis centres, particularly for looking at sexual violence and harassment, the most important telling of any story is the very first. You know, how have I been heard? Do I get a sense that I'm being believed? Do I get a sense that this has been taken aboard? That's the most important thing, not very often the end sanction. And we know from Speak Out, again, from the reporting tool, some of the questions that we ask are about, you know, did you make a formal report to the university or the police? And if you didn't, why not? And by far, the two most given answers are, one, I won't be believed, so I didn't. And two, even if I do, nothing will happen. So those two pieces of information tell us so much about people's trust in the system. So as I said, you know, it is about then putting that back up there. If we're asking people to trust us with their most vulnerable experiences, we have to put something back out, and not just in terms of sanctions, but for being able to say to people, here are the amount of investigations that were carried out. Here are the types of behaviours that were brought forward by staff, students, visitors to the university. And where complaints were upheld, these were the sanctions or remediations or restorative pieces that were put in place by numbers. So not listing them down by schools, by faculties, by people. So because it's not about naming and shaming people, it's about changing culture. But we have to put something back out there. If we're asking people to tell us, we have to say, you've told us we're trying to do things better and this is what this looks like. It's worked in other jurisdictions. And I know, even when I say it out loud, that the hesitancy that'll come with that will make us look bad. But I think we have to move away from that in our culture here, particularly in Ireland. And we have to move away from that to looking at, we have to be transparent. You know, we have to have responsibility and accountability, but in a safe way. But be transparent so people can say, okay, like last year, 5 complaints about this type of, you know, whether it's psychological violence, sexual violence, physical violence, whatever, race violence, whatever it looks like. And I'm using a global term of violence on that. It's not necessarily that it's a violent behavior. And something did happen. So it instills confidence in people who may not feel, I would have brought it forward, or who previously answered, there's no point. That maybe if they see that we're willing to publish, yes, we will do it, that they will gain confidence, because culture won't change if we don't have a culture of accountability, a culture of responsibility, and a culture of openness. So for that purpose, I think, so what it would look like would be publishing, you know, for want of a better word, redacted results. So it's not naming and shaming schools, people, but it's about looking at the issues that come forward. And this is how we deal with them. And these are the kind of sanctions, because that, I think, over time will instill confidence. And it will take time, because it's a shift in culture. Does that answer? In a very long-winded way, sorry.
Thank you, Catherine. Well, building trust and confidence it has to be taken intersectionally, because that is also something to bear in mind. I was thinking, we were talking about building confidence and trust. There will be some groups that it will be much harder. So we need, you know, to gain that trust than others. So intersectionality is coming here all the way. And I want to ask if there are any other questions. Yes, could you come here? At the end, I think it's better, because very long questions is very difficult for me to repeat. If you don't mind.
It's just a question for Philip. I just was curious to know about why the university maybe has not gone down the road of looking at the race equality character that currently exists in the UK. You know, I think, you know, or is there a stride or so to look at the race equality character? You know, that is just I mean, we talked about the character for university design. So you know, I can see it's really interesting to see how it's been embedded across kind of the design in the university, and even in terms of kind of, you know, evaluation and schools and stuff like that. But you know, I suppose that I think you know, where I say Athena Swan, for example, if you look at the work that's been done with Athena Swan in terms of linking, you know, outcomes for funding and things like that, I just wonder, has that ever been brought up in terms of looking at charity?
Yeah, thanks very much for that question. Now, I'm not saying that we have looked at everything, but we've try to look at everything that we can actually contextualize in terms of where we are at the moment. Now, even when we started with advanced HE, remember it's a UK-based consultancy, and they would have based their training on the UK Charter. So we borrowed that blueprint, but then bringing in our local context where, remember that we already have 9 bases for discrimination, for example, and color or religion or even gender being part of those. So we've looked at those, but at the same time tried to address what it is in Ireland that can actually be able to support that, not to encourage that everything goes to a punitive mode, but we've focused more on primary education, educating, enlightening people on what ends up being a racial discrimination or what even prompts that. Remember that there are things also like microaggressions that also come into being at the moment. But in totality, to answer your question directly, is that we've considered those, but we have paraphrased them into our local context to be able to adapt them to what is achievable within our institution as TUW. Now, I'm not sure whether, yeah, thank you.
Any other question? Okay, I have a few questions, but we may go, we can talk about this in the break. I have a question for Philip first. The question is about what we have been working on intersectionality and intersectionality policy in higher education institutions for quite a while. And one big challenge is data and data gathering and data analysis. And I don't know to what extent this is a problem here in Ireland, but I know that in higher education institutions in other countries is a big challenge. We have been looking at Athena-Swan applications, and not only at TU Dublin, but also around other Irish universities and universities around Europe. And even though in the Athena-Swan Charter now is really pushing for intersectionality, this intersectionality, especially gender and race, is not very clear yet. Even, like Limerick got a silver award, and I was taking a look at the Limerick application. And I wonder to what extent this is because it's new. So the question of this is something that is being developed, looking at this intersection between gender and race in Ireland, or it is a question of data or non-availability of data, and what needs to be done there, because data is very important for, evidence-informed policy. We need to know what is the situation in TU Dublin. I have also another question for Catherine Deegan. I wonder to what extent building communities of practices around UDL, if there are difficulties there. I know that there was a disability network in TU Dublin and it faced difficulties as opposed to other networks because of difficulties of access and getting together, etc., etc. So for these kind of actions, and now TU Dublin have taken this community of practice approach, which is very, very important. So if you could speak a little bit about any difficulty or how to overcome in building these communities of practice around UDL, which is not about disability, but it has a very important component. So I don't know whether you want to answer or maybe, you know, briefly, and then we break for a coffee. Yeah, would that be okay? Okay, and there is. Okay, there is also a question on the chat, I think, but first, if you can, you know, if you can answer briefly, and then I'll deal with it.
Yeah, and thanks very much for that question of intersectionality, because as I said when I was presenting there, that is where you actually get the most disadvantaged, the most precarious situations that need actually to be remedied. Now, the difficulty has been that even ourselves as a university, we have an HR software that has never been used to its full potential. It has capability to collect a lot of data, including race, segregation. Rather, it can segregate that by race and all that, but has never been put into practice. Now, the problem that most of the HEIs are facing in Ireland at the moment is that the number of staff who are of different race is actually quite small. So you can use that, but it will be pinpointed to the person who has actually been able to contribute that data. So there has been a bit of hesitancy in trying to use that. But at the same time, in the survey that was conducted by, supported by the HEA, we have been given a drive, and there's a requirement now that in as much as that data might not be useful at the moment because of the small proportion or the smallness in number, but it needs to be collected such that we can actually be able to measure growth of interventions or even record events as they occur. Now, remember that an event doesn't have to be a discriminating event. It can be a near miss event, for example, that an intended action, but that still needs to be recorded in one way or another. But again, coming back to your question, we have capability to be able to collect that data. Is that at the moment, collecting that data maybe has minimal use, but it's something that needs to still be collected to be able to give us a future perspective when we can reflect back on where we have moved from. Okay.
On the communities of practice, fundamentally a community of practice is just a collection of people who have either a similar challenge or else a similar interest, but that there needs to be a common goal or a common purpose. And there, as I said, there's several in TU Dublin. They may be long-lived or short-lived, and that's perfectly okay. Largely, I say informal, but also formal in that there needs to be a set structure. There always needs to be somebody for them to work. There needs to be a leader or leaders, people who are willing to actually do the work to set the form, set the structure, whether, and by a mean structure, there needs to be a somewhat regular set. For example, I would do at least 2 workshops in a semester for the assistive technology one, which is the one I lead largely. Because mine was technology and I set it up during the pandemic, I had a small amount of funding and I established a website resource because there was no other way to communicate. And I had a social media set up, so that was a way to get interest. I found that one was not difficult to sustain because it was technology based. Everyone always has there's always new people who don't know a specific piece of technology and it's always changing. So that's not specifically difficult. And also with AI coming in, the impact of that, people still need to know what AI is, what it is and what it can do for me, what it can't do for you. And now also the intersectionality piece is coming in now. It's okay, that's accessible, but it's not diverse. You know, you need to incorporate diversity as well as, you know, AI will auto caption that for you, but it's still not a diverse piece. You know, there needs to be, we need to start expanding what we understand by inclusion and diversity. So that's one. Where communities of practice can be difficult, frankly, is if they're too big. If the needs and wants of the group are too large without enough support. If you haven't set down what, there needs to be a little bit of sort of the aims and objectives, you know, what we're trying to, you know, get done here or what we want to do. And there needs to be a few people active. It doesn't, I had a discussion, say, with the high flex community of practice at the start. You know, I've got over maybe 200 people here, but only, you know, a handful are active. Does that mean the rest are not? No, you can have silent members who are gaining a lot. I have a lot of persons with disabilities in the assistive tech who are very quiet. They're still very valuable because they are gaining massive amounts, and they have actually contributed anonymously to the COP via opinions. They have anonymously answered surveys, and so you need to have a very sort of open mind to COPs and what constitutes contribution, and people can contribute. And I think to have a diversity mindset is very, very important for COPs. And patience, you know, some meetings will not be well attended, some will be very well, but largely there's a few sets. I had a paper on it at one of the EET Plus meetings. It's common interest, common need. There needs to be a need for the COP. And it's okay to let it rest for a little bit and then come back with a renewed, and you can change, they evolve. So very much off with it.
Any questions before I read? And there is here, okay, it's more a comment than a question. It comes from Gronia Words. It is a comment for Catherine Bolger. Okay, so it says more a comment than a question. I think it was Catherine B. who mentioned that if a person makes a disclosure to a staff member, then the staff member will refer the student to the appropriate person who can handle the complaint. I would be concerned that if the student is simply told, speak to X, and sent on their way, we might lose them. So all staff need to be trained in appropriate referral approach. Is this part of the training for staff?
Hi, and thank you for that comment question. Yes, it is. We run disclosure training that is for all staff, and we run that 4 times a year, face-to-face, and twice a year online, and that's with the self-sign-up, and then other schools and departments have brought it in as needed. Now, just to confirm, a disclosure is not necessarily a complaint, and that's what part of the disclosure training is trying to bring about, that a disclosure is simply somebody telling us something. And when we are the disclosure taker, it is up to us to clarify what it is that person would like us to do with that. Like, what would they feel they would like to happen next? Because even as a staff member, we have to be so careful that we're not running off with an agenda, that this is something that needs to be reported. I have to action this, because that may not be what the person wants. So we need to be very clear that when somebody gives us a disclosure of any incident, that, you know, we need to be very clear when we hear that our question would be, what would they like to happen next? And so we're taking our lead from them. We inform them of all the policies that are available to them. We inform them of all the supports that are available to them. And I suppose it's really about not losing the person by potentially taking an action that we feel is the right action for us without checking in with them. So, you know, it is about being fully aware of what all the support services are available to them. And, you know, what we suggest to staff would be that, you know, after somebody discloses something to you, and they're maybe not sure of what they want to happen next, or they're maybe not sure if they even want to seek support, that maybe follow it up with an email just saying, you know, after our meeting today, you know, as promised, here's a copy of all the procedures and policies. Here's a copy of all the support services. You know, have a read through those, have a think about what you would like to happen next. And maybe you and I can meet again. So something as simple as that, but allows them a space to make a decision about what they feel they would like to happen next. And then you're extending an arm with all of the information, but also an arm for them to come back and clarify or ask a question. So I suppose the purpose is to not lose people. And that's what we would hope. But it is, training is vital, because people are unsure of what a disclosure is. And sometimes staff feel that they have an obligation to act on it when somebody tells them something. But we need to clarify if that's what somebody's looking for. I hope that answers the question. Go on, is it?
And thank you, Gronia, for raising this question, Gronia Ward. Okay, we are going to stop for a coffee for about 15 minutes. And then we go to our second panel, that is EDI initiatives in Bosnia and Herzegovina and Italy taking international perspectives. Okay, so thank you very much. And thank you very much to the panel.
We should have stand here. Yeah. Thanks, Catherine. So, I'm going to use- share the screen. Yeah, and then it's this. Okay. Is that okay? Yeah. I'll stand there.
Yeah, Angela's just going to. If we could all take our seats, please, we're about to start again. No, it's. Oh, sorry. Okay, so our next panel discussion is Angela from the University of Genoa, and then we're going to have Yasminka from the School of Social Science and Technology in Sarajevo, and they're going to discuss EDI perspectives from a European perspective. So we're going to start with Angela first.
Okay, I hope to see now. Okay. Thanks at all. And now I try to explain about our groups. I am Angela Preste, then with me always present Carla, and there is also Rita and Cinzia. What is that? No, I missed the. I charted the presentation not correct. Sorry. I try to try to see. It wasn't directly from them. Okay, this is background. I remember that I have reset today. The first sorry. Okay, then go up. Okay. I divided my presentation in 5 principal points according to the action that the University of Genoa implement proposed inside of the quality development inclusion part. The first is related to my activity. Sorry. The first is correlated to my activity because I am a teacher engineering, I teach hydrology, and I want to improve how it is possible to, during a course that is a technical engineering course, to improve the quality, inclusion, and gender. The second aspect is the activity that now is implemented in Genoa, according to the modification of presentation of course syllabi of our activity. Then the recently implemented measures on the plan, positive action plans and gender equality plan. Then some of the examples best practice in which we are working to include the students with disabilities. And then what the University of Genoa does inside of the different national ranking. Then The hydrology is classical aspect. This is the hydrological cycle. And this is usually it is the first slide that I try to explain to my students, because it's necessary that there is a cycle in which the water is maintained, and then there is a conservation of this. Obviously, water is strictly correlated to all of the sustainable development goals that are here represented. And in particular, it's possible to represent, to try to explain at our students that, for instance, using the water, you can see that there is a strong correlation. The width of the line, the link, and the number of inside indicates the possible correlation among them. And you see that this is one of the possible representations that correlate water, that is the principal aspect of hydrology goals, with the other sustainable development goals. There are different types of possibility to explain this, obviously focusing on one or more of these sustainable goals, and it's possible to evaluate. And this representation now is possible to find in different papers, and then it's possible to improve the students that this aspect is an aspect that is also interesting for the future research. Then it is also correlated to another aspect of my activity in research as teacher, that is the water-related disaster. My focus on master degree is on natural disaster, on coastal environment, but include also the river flood. Then you see that the water is correlated with also with this, for different aspects, of course. Then there is the other aspect that's correlated not only with the sustainable development 6, that is water, but also with sustainable development 5, that is gender equality. And it is the water, sanitation, and the region and gender equality that usually is also frequently set in the papers, in specialty papers, as gender equality and social inclusion. There are a lot of research and papers in which you find this aspect, and it's interesting that you can involve your students to study this type of aspect. It is clear that water is essential, but it is also clear that it is strictly related also to quality of the education. Why this? Because in particular country of the world, to collect the water is a duty in charge of women. And it means that women doesn't follow the school, the institution, the education. Then another aspect, also the aspect of the new critical condition that now the scarcity of water produce new type of migration. And this is correlated to the climate change, which is another sustainable development goals. It is important that our students knows what are the footprint. And what means that when you eat or you buy something, you know what amount of water they use and where this water is used, of course. And the last is the strict connection, because my course is mechanical engineering and energy. That is the strict connection of forward. Switch on the registration. Okay. I can put the full. Little time to arrive. Okay. Then food, that is another cause of immigration, energy and water. Then we have, for instance, in the European countries, the scarcity of water reduces the production of energy from water. Then there is another negative impact of the climate change. We can insert also some possible solution that we can utilize in the climate adaptation. That is the nature-based solution. That is a particular solution which you can utilize nature and natural features to reduce the effects of climate change. Usually, it's possible that you implement this type of solution to protect, to manage in sustainable way, restore natural or particular ecosystem. And it is one of the actions usually implemented as climate change mitigation. In this, we adopt this type of solution, we have a good biodiversity benefits, and usually we support the nature in general. There are not expensive solutions usually, and sometimes can be produce benefits also for the environment in general, and also to realize a use of particular area of the town. This is clear that I wish to consider natural basic solution as an umbrella in which you insert a lot of aspects, and obviously that is necessary that the policy and the practice and academic will be implemented, and obviously take into account the ecosystem adaptation and mitigation, and also that's possible to insert this in the classification of green and blue infrastructure or ecological restoration of particular area in which we have problem according to. If you implement a simple research, insert the two words, a natural basis solution and gender, you find a lot of papers. And this means that is a new area which is possible to work, to implement research, and obviously take into account that it's possible to preserve the environment, increase the quality of the life, and avoid the discrimination towards the gender, or another type of discrimination, of course. Then the core syllabi. It was a particular action. It was recently that starts for the next year, academic year, and in which we have inserted in each our core syllabi what it will indicate as according to the sustainable development goals, but also what type of skill you can do things to define that your students obtain at the end of your course. And it's necessary that you define in a specific way, not only what type of skill you want to obtain, but also how you want to obtain this. For this reason, we have instituted, according to the recommendation of the Commission of European, an open badge. Then our students, if they follow the students, the teacher improves some activity to teach, that is to clap, flip-flop, or other activities that is interactive activity, it's possible that they insert in their curriculum vitae a badge that is an open badge international that is possible to certify, and obviously this is an activity supported by different centers that are working inside of the university. This is the list I didn't read because of the principal skill that we have adopted inside of our course. Obviously, each university can define, and obviously this is possible that the duty of the teacher is to produce this type of skill, to verify, and then when the students overcame the course, you can insert or not the students in the open badge assessment. It is clear that, and I will show you quickly some papers in which this subject that I try to describe in short way during and concentrated, especially of my activity of research, I'll be present in different papers. It is two general papers, that is adaptation, climate change, the sustainable development goals, gender, water, sanitation, and so on. That is a general view. That is possible, that is not an idea only for myself, but is an idea that is applied in general in the world. What we have done at the University of Genoa, has implemented the positive action plans from 15 years, more or less, than it is, because it is institutional, or it is the rules from the law in Italy. But in the last years, we have implemented a tax reduction program for student caregivers. We have established and approved a comprehensive inclusive language guideline. We are working at the Department Gender Action Plan, in my department, of course, and the Department of Physics, that are two usual men department, engineering, chemical, civil engineering, and physics, but we are working that. Not only we are also starting to implement in the project gender action plans in some new proposal, answering to Horizon European calls. And obviously we are piloting inclusive syllabi in all courses, because now for the next year, it is only a part of the course have implemented this, but we hope that the number increase in the successive years. A particular focus inside of the university is in concentrated of the inclusion of students with disabilities, all type of disabilities, of course, not only the problem of the students that are not able to work or architectural problems. And this is, for instance, the page or website. Sorry, it is in Italian, but it's only to see the list of different action activities that are implemented in Genoa. And for instance, one of the services that from the library, it is possible that the students call a particular file. That is the possible that the service of library duplicate this file in a format MP3 and then send again to the students. And this is a service that is present in all of the 5 library present in the University of Genoa. Another is possible that also the announcement are sent to the people that are not able to listen or not able to see. Then we have a particular chain of communication for this group of students. And the other is then we have inside of our platform that support the activity to teach in Genoa. And together with the group in which we have implemented the open badge, we have considered that possibility to define different particular special education in English examination. That is the support, because there are some necessary to have a test, overcome a test of English, then some activity especially dedicated for these students. That is obviously an activity that is shared among these companies and this office. Last of all, but not obviously less important, is that we have started to organize the principal area in which we organize a meeting, conference, so with the portable ring system. It is possible that we dedicate a part of this big classroom to dedicate for people that utilize the hearing system. Then it's possible to have this. Obviously, this is a project that we have implemented at this moment in the classroom and the important area of university that have not problem to access, of course. And now we have implemented in 2 classrooms where we organize obviously the principal meeting. Genoa is for different aspects participate at different international ranking. Why I have inserted this slide? I have inserted this slide because in each of these international rankings, there is some voice in which we speak about gender, we speak about disabilities, we speak about inclusion. Also, we speak about climate, of course. And then it is important that each university participate at this international ranking, not to have a position higher than respect to another, but to a possibility to compare the solution, the different possible solution, and share the best practice that we, all of us, implement of this aspect. We have international, but also national network. And for instance, we have this particular network. This is, in English, it is related as a sustainability network of university, in which we have a lot of groups of work, and in which we have in particular a good exchange of best practice inside of the Italian university. Inclusion, discrimination, environmental, mobility, and so on. It is very along the group is very, very important. I hope to have demonstrated what we are doing, and I hope that is interesting as you presented this morning, because very surprised of the amount of activity that you've done. Congratulations. We are a little university, but we started to work. Thanks. I don't know if it's no.
Thanks, Angela. We're going to have Yasminka now. And just going to stop. Pause or stop. Yeah. So maybe you can have that idea picture. Oh, the idea pictures. Yeah. Yes. Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, I will not have a presentation, but for each slide, I will have to say 1,000 words now, right? It's really great to be here with you this morning. It was a very, very inspiring panel that we had this morning. It motivated me quite a lot to see all the work that's happening on EDI. And I'm looking forward actually to learning more and seeing how we can incorporate this back home. So again, my name is Yasminka Hasic. I come from University of Sarajevo School of Science and Technology, based in Sarajevo, Bosnia and Herzegovina. And I am a computer scientist. Okay, so a lot of people here, you know, come from engineering backgrounds and different kinds of fields, but we've actually learned that if we do not get involved with EDI, you know, we won't be able to really fully use our own capacities, but then also capacities of our students and future generations to come. So I think we're doing very important work here. So first of all, I'd like to say that, you know, I'm very comfortable being in Ireland. I've always loved coming back here, and I feel very much at home. But also, I really admire what Ireland has done in the field of gender equality. I was talking to Yvonne last night, and she told me that something like 8 out of 15 Irish universities these days are headed by women, and this used to be 0, not so far ago. So this really means like some serious effort has been made, and it's really great to see that the work is paying off and the difference is being made. In terms of what's happening, also, you know, I think what has helped Ireland is this Athena Swan effort, which is the UK that overspilled, you know, to Ireland. And I think all the rest of us from Europe are really taking this as a starting point. And it has really pushed the Commission to require the gender equality plans for the EU funding, which is also great, because this is really helping us in Bosnia to put these things on the agenda. So in terms of gender equality back home, actually our starting numbers are not that bad. So I first started working in gender equality in a SAGE project, and Sarah was actually part of this project. We had actually Trinity and the Queen's University in that project. So a lot of Irish influence. So when we compared, you know, for example, the grade 8 researchers in, you know, at universities and other kind of statistics. In Bosnia, we're not doing so bad, you know. So for example, also in computer science, we have almost parity in terms of, you know, the girls that are studying computer science. So in some ways, you know, we have some good indicators, but then, you know, it's hard to mobilize people to work on gender equality because when you look at the dean's positions, there are no women. When you look at the university president's positions, there are no women. When you look at the political representation, so in leadership in general, even though there's quite a lot of, you know, women who get these skills, who show that they're really excellent in these skills, they don't get to decide, basically. So within this stage, there was the first gender equality project that was implemented in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and with the great help of the institutions that I already mentioned. So right now, Bosnia and Herzegovina just became a EU candidate country with a great effort and with lots of problems. You know, unfortunately, as you know, we are not the most politically stable place, and so it's really hard to come to a consensus, even, you know, about small problems, small issues. So right now, we're hoping that well, there's some talk from Brussels that there will be enlargement, and the Western Balkans is part of that enlargement. So we're hoping that with these efforts, you know, there'll be even more EU initiatives and more ways that we can liaison with all of the European partners and share this work on the important subject. So yeah, in terms of the participation in Horizon Europe, it's quite modest, you know, and Yvonne this morning praised me, you know, but unfortunately, you know, we have so few examples where, you know, we have people from Bosnia that are leading these kinds of projects. So, but I'm hoping that this is just the beginning, and we'll start working on those more. And actually, EDI, the project we are working on right now, has this as its aim to actually increase our participation within those projects. So if you have any ideas and want to include, you know, Bosnian partners, just so you know, we will be, yes, yes. So in terms of gender equality, what is happening furthermore on the national level, we have, and this is with a great push of the European Commission, and because it's requiring the JEP for this funding, we have very little local funding research. So basically, people are really now trying to get to the European funding, and then, you know, university having a JEP is a very good requirement. So people think about gender equality. We have one project which includes almost all Bosnian universities. In addition, a lot of the universities from other Western Balkan countries. And it's called the UNIGEM, University Gender Mainstreaming. And within that project, you know, we actually, it was held by the UK government. It's all the universities have pretty much developed their gender equality plans. So we have this first, you know, document and actions that everybody is working on. So maybe also to sort of draw a parallel here, you know, Ireland is working very closely, the UK, lots of initiatives, you know, overspill from the UK, and, you know, you speak the common language, and there's lots of, you know, of course, that helps with the cultural things. We have a similar things in the Western Balkans, you know, we all speak the same language, even we give it 4 different names, and but we understand each other, you know, and you know, a lot of these and really people, you know, even given the complex political situations, people really, you know, collaborate very well, and there's lots of joint initiatives, and, you know, we copy from each other, and, you know, there's lots of practices that get translated from one country to another. So a little bit, as Angela was speaking about engendering knowledge in mechanical engineering, to give my computer science background a little justice, now as well. I will talk a little bit about what I'm doing in terms of engendering knowledge in my research, in what I'm doing. So my research is based, most recent research is based on machine learning and AI algorithms. And what I'm mostly concerned is with different medical applications. One type of medical data that I'm particularly interested in is analysis of microbiome. And these are all the different bacteria that live on us, in us, and so forth. So we have like around maybe almost 2 kilos of bacteria, you know, that are us. So we have a whole new world that's part of us. And actually the amount of genetic information that bacteria has is actually larger than our own genetic information. So this whole new world, you know, contains a lot of different data that we still have to decipher. There have been great connections with the consistency of microbiome and different kinds of conditions, illnesses. So there's this gut microbiome, gut brain axis. I don't know, probably that's something that's quite known, but you know, different makeup of microbiome can influence Alzheimer's disease, autism spectrum disorder, IBF. So there's been a link, you know, with many, many different diseases. But then in terms of what can be engendered there is a difference, of course, in the women's, you know, microbiome, how it looks like, you know, when women is having her period. There's the vaginal microbiome. There's an influence that vaginal microbiome might have on the success of IVF. So basically, it's a field, you know, that has a lot of applications for engendering knowledge, because the medicine, a big deal about the big topic in medicine these days is personalized medicine. So not applying just, you know, one solution to all the people, but then, you know, if you take care of gender, you know, you're already, you know, taking care of 50%, which is a very good dimension to first consider, right? So, yeah, so maybe just a little bit more in terms of EDI in general. I already said, you know, it's hard to put the topic of gender on the agenda because ethical, you know, ethnical membership is something that's really important. You know, I guess the same way in the Northern Ireland, you have to have a representation, you know, of all the groups. We have it the same way. Well, actually, the Good Friday Agreement was brokered by Clinton administration within months of the peace agreement, Dayton peace agreement in Bosnia. So I think there are a lot of, you know, parallels that we actually share with Northern Ireland. Our governments are paralyzed also, but anyway, yeah. So basically, this ethical, you know, principle dominates. You know, it's all about who is representing which ethical group, and it's mostly, you know, in politics is mostly male, you know, so it doesn't matter, you know, that, you know, there's huge, you know, we have, of course, over 50% females, but the participation is still very small. And I'm actually hoping that by sort of putting the gender and saying, okay, you know, you're so certain that you have to have a certain number of these ethical people, you know, in some representation, but if you have 0% of the majority, you know, how is that really representing your population, you know? So I think in a way, maybe that's also our chance to really argue that this intersectionality, that it's not only the ethical principle, but also there is gender and all the other issues as well that matter. And maybe I can also just mention the LGBTQI community. We have had the first Pride quite late, I think like 4 years ago, something like that. But it went well without any problems. And the rights for these communities are also developing, and they're moving in the right direction, I believe. You know, so yeah, so that's me for this intro, and I hope I gave you some information about the place where I'm coming from. So I'm looking forward to discuss more.
Thank you, Yasminka. It's great to get the chance to hear about Bosnia and Italy, of course. So I'm just going to check the chat. I don't think there's any questions at the moment. So if anyone online wants to have a think about asking something. So do we have any questions, Sarah? Yeah, this is a question I have a lot of curiosity about, and it's a question for both Angela and Jasminka. And I want to know what you think, probably you know this, the European Commission have been looking into the possibility of creating a European-wide certification for not just gender equality, because now the move is towards, more intersectional approaches, and they have built different scenarios to how to do this, because if we have like a European-wide certification on equality, diversity, and inclusion, there are different ways, different models we can take. One was Athena Swan, of course. So taking the Athena Swan certification model and adapt it in order to apply it for all members of the European Union. Given also this requirement now that in order to apply for Horizon Europe funding and European funding, all institutions, higher education institutions, they need to have a gender equality plan in place. There is this move towards more inclusiveness, and also the idea that there is a huge kind of imbalance between what it means, gender equality plans. The requirements are quite basic when you fill in you put an application for funding. So you find that some gender equality plans are extremely sophisticated, and other gender equality plans, you find that it is very vague. You don't know if there are no targets, whether they are being implemented. So actually they were looking, and there was a project that was funded by the Commission to look at the different ways in which this certification, could, like opening that. So what would you think, because Athena Swan, I think that the kind of perception in Europe outside the UK, Ireland, of course, is Australia, because Athena Swan is also there in Australia, is that it's very Anglo-Saxon and very very kind of designed for a different kind of cultures, and also higher universities, more Anglo-Saxon universities. And what would be like the advantages, because advantages that's why this is being studied, of this European-wide certification, and what could be the disadvantages from your point of view, from Genoa and from SSSD? Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Sara. Always your questions are really interesting and focalized. Athena's one. I didn't speak about in my presentation about Athena's one because it is not European. And for us, it is a big problem. With my colleagues, I followed Athena's one proposal scheme to define the gender action plan of my department and the department of physics. But we follow without obtaining certification because it is not possible now. And the other aspect that you have indicated is very important, because now we implement a gender equality plan. We implement a lot of actions. We monitoring, for instance, we have finished the first year, then we have proposed at the end of the year a new presentation inside of our official structure of the university. And we done this, but it is not a request formally from European. For the European Commission, when you present a new proposal, you put a flag without any information. You have implemented 5 pilot, 3, 0. For instance, in Genoa, probably we spoke about yesterday, but I repeat for the new people present, we have proposed also a 0 area, a new area. That is an area that produce documents, structure to realize better, we hope, the different actions. For instance, we implement a data warehouse to collect all data divided for gender and not always binary, gender plus, we hope, for each aspect that is necessary to implement a gender balance local. All students, the technical administration, the teacher, simple problems that we have now, we have not a list in where it is indicated the gender of the people that are component of the commission of the concourse. But is requested. This is a simple thing. Then we done a lot of this. We have prepared a plan of communication correlated to the gender and the contrast against the all type of discrimination inside the university. It is a lot of job, in my opinion, but it's not the job that the European Commission see or evaluate. Then if you try to obtain a new procedure to have a certificate that this university is not gold, that's enough one, because it's very difficult. But for instance, our departments in which we are implemented now, I suppose that we can obtain without problem silver. That's why it is not possible to implement this label in our project. This is very important. I don't know, it is if we can organize a group and we go to the Commission European and we explain, it is not problem for me. I have no problem. I've discussed it a long time ago for the revision of the European Flood Directive. Then it's not problem to come to Brussels to explain something. That is because it's very important. Necessary that this type of action and also to justify the amount of money that the community, European community spend for this project. And this is the condition. This is in economical view, this is a positive balance. If you say, okay, I have spent it, you have done. Yes. Yes, of course, this is that, but this is the question. Then really, I follow with Athena's one. It is the problem is that, for instance, my director said, okay, we implement all in English. But why in English? We are in Italian. I said, okay, we implement in English. Then we can present the next meeting. I present you my gap of my department in English. We present also inside of our institutional governance of the university in Italian. But you have this document. It is a good job, in my opinion, of course, but not useful for the new project. And it is a big problem. I hope to answer your question, and I probably create a new question, but it's not. Thanks.
Okay, yeah, so maybe I can add a little bit, as you, Sarah, pointed right. that is just a document right now, and it's enough just to tick, in the EU application, whether you have this document or not. This document can be very simple and not have, the activities defined in this smart way with all the building blocks, but it can be also very elaborate. But a very elaborate document also doesn't guarantee anything, right? So it can be just a copy paste of a very elaborate document that comes from other institutions that's not even based on the data from that institution. It's not evidence based, But so basically, to really have a chance to make a real change, you really have to, start with the evidence gathering, find, the evidence to support the actions, devise the actions, and basically, to be able to follow that kind of process, you really need certification, And I think I really think, what I've seen in Ireland is amazing, because, this change is something that's really hard to do. And I feel like it's happening. It's just, Ireland is just trailblazing, So I wonder how detrimental is Athena Smart and the certification process in all of this, because there is these checks that really check the whole process, And I think it would be very good to follow this project that the EU has set up, but I think it is needed to have this certification to really check how was your JEP created? Was it really based on real data gathered? Was it really devised? Then once you created it, have you really done the implementation? Try to address things, monitor, and So I feel like without the full control of this process, which is what Athena Smart really does, this kind of certification, it's really hard to believe, that the university is trying to address gender equality. Yeah.
So we're still having no one wanting to ask a question online, and we're just coming up to Sarah finishing. But before we move to that, does anyone, Catherine, would you like to ask anything? And come on up. Yeah. Yeah. Not before lunch.
Before lunch. My timing is impeccable. A question that rises to me around Athena Swan or any of the programs, and I mean, big fans of Athena Swan, it's great. But a question I would have about gender equality is the motivation behind applying for the Athena Swan. Like, is there a genuine interest, do we think, this is a general question for everybody, in achieving a better gender balance and looking for gender equality and gender equity, or is it somewhat a tick box to get Athena Swan? That's the kind of question, like, is there evidence that shows us that there has been a change, that there has been a shift in gender equality in its true sense, or is it on paper that it's there, but is it followed through? When we look at the checks and we look at, and I'm thinking particularly in schools where there's greater gender imbalance, or faculties where there's greater gender imbalance, like, is it followed through to check that the implementation is really happening after the award happens, or on the ground, is there feedback? As we're looking at, I truly believe as well in the research that, are people's experiences that gender equity and gender equality is changing as a result of these kind of measures.
We in the Royal College of Surgeons have just got our bronze Athena Swan renewal. And I would say that certainly Athena Swan has been a game changer for Irish HEIs. So just looking at the gender component, for example, so when we submitted our initial plan in 2018, one of our goals was to improve the level of women at senior professorial level. So we had our benchmark, and then we were able to report that in 2022, we'd moved the dial from 10% to 33%. So, but you know, like looking at the action plan, there are very specific and measurable actions, and Advance HE has been very clear on that. And I certainly think our action plan this time round, you know, it's getting better all the time, and I think we're measuring more. We have that whole intersectional approach, but like in 2018, it was also new. So I think it's a continuous process of improvement. But I think it's really focused minds, and the association with funding has been hugely important. And I suppose back to Catherine's point about carrot and stick in relation to a number of these initiatives. So yes, initially it was a bit of a stick to ensure that we implemented gender and broader equality measures. But I also think that it's had a huge impact on culture, and people are seeing that, you know. So like, do you recommend RCSI as a good place to work? You know, how do you feel about you know, how do you feel about opportunities in terms of mentoring and career progression? Those of all, the dial has moved, but we can't be complacent. So it is that continuous focus and meeting up on a regular basis and kind of go, listen, we're slipping behind in action number 10. What's happening? So it's just keeping the eye on the ball all the time. But like for us, we have evidence that it's working. So.
To produce an Athena form document and to produce the gender balance is a way to measure and then to realize what is the situation. And not all, for instance, in Italy, it is not possible to promote a call only for women professors, for instance. Then also if we have in this period some funds arriving from recovery funds to improve the presence of women in the company and also in the research area, it is not possible to promote select a specific course. Then we have chosen a political of communication. For instance, we produce a communication which we share this call, put in evidence that it is open at all gender and utilize especially picture. For instance, the design is very important. Picture that indicates that is a position open. In this way, the Polytechnical of Turin have received in a call financed by recovery funds a 30% more of form from panel, 30% more. Only change the type of communication, because not in each country in Southern Europe, the law are different. For instance, for us, it's not possible. To produce each year a gender balance is very important, especially at a scale of department. It's important to keep attention to the new call for the career, to support the gender less present, to increase, because for instance, in Italy, we have in the medical area a strong presence of female and the less presence of male. Then it is necessary to compensate this part. In engineering, in some part are more or less similar to the situation that Jasmine explained are 50%. In other part are very, very low, the female. But in, for instance, in nursing area, all female. That is not possible. That is why? This because the problem of culture. We can, one of the people that speaks this morning explain something about the primary school. It's necessary to start to work to improve the culture of equality of gender, not difference among gender from the primary school. And it is necessary to improve this. For instance, now, simple, say you things very personal. I didn't produce a gift for a male that is the characteristic of male. I always present a general. Why not possible to give as present a doll as a male? Why? Why not? And then I produce some problems in my family, but it's not a problem.
Thank you. Well, thanks to everyone for asking questions and for people coming up and answering them. And just before we move to Sarah, I think we're still grand online. So Sarah's going to finish up and then we'll be having lunch virtually and physically.
Yeah, actually, I don't have much to say at this stage. The only thing that I would say is to big thanks to everybody to coming here and for this exchange. Very interesting, different contributions and inputs. And so there is lunch there for, I think, Niv, lunch is served, yeah? There is lunch if you want to grab a bite before going. And we will keep in touch. We are now in TU Dublin. We have 2 projects on institutional change towards gender plus equality. That means EDI. And for that, it is not just in Rinke working on these projects, but we really need the collaboration of all those in TU Dublin working in different areas, as we have seen this morning. You know, for these projects, because in Rinke we are part of EDI, which is an very important directorate, but this is a work of all the university achieving and driving towards EDI, and so your contributions will be very much appreciated. So thank you very much. And thank you very much for also our EDIRE partners here, for our colleagues at the Royal College of Surgeons in Ireland. And thanks for Niv. Niv has done a fantastic job, big applause, in organizing these events. Okay, so thank you very much, everybody. And if you want some lunch, there it is.
Yeah.